This video is the first in a series that I'm calling Good Habits for Freelancers. In this series I'm going to share with you tips and techniques that can help you be more productive, feel more fulfilled, less anxious and stressed, and help you use your time with more intention. These are tips or techniques that have helped me in my freelance career as a writer, director, actor and producer here in Auckland, New Zealand. I'm partly doing this series to remind myself of these ideas at the start of 2025, but hopefully they'll be useful to you too. Let's get into it. Each video in this series is going to be focused on a specific topic, and this first one is all about getting organized. The key idea for this video is that you need to get things out of your head and put them down in a structured way into some sort of system. This is going to free up your brain space for the actual work that you want to do, rather than having to constantly remember admin or logistical things, which can honestly lead to a subconscious sense of anxiety or stress. I'm going to share 4 tips on this topic. Getting organized is also going to help set you up to make the most of the rest of the habits in this series. The first tip is something I came across in David Allen's book, Getting Things Done. This book describes his GTD method, a way of organizing your personal and professional life so that nothing slips through the cracks. The GTD method is a productivity system that helps you be more intentional with your time and make sure that you're working on exactly what you want to be working on in that moment. An in-tray is a place where you can dump any thought or task or idea that pops up into your head so that you don't have to actively remember it. Anytime you think of something you want to remember, you should note it down in your in-tray, which can be a physical place like a notebook that you always carry with you, or a digital place. I use my Notion homepage for this. It's important to jot down these thoughts as soon as they come up. The in-tray is sort of a holding space for ideas. You would then go through it periodically and sort out all the different thoughts into where they need to go, which I'll cover in more detail in the 4th tip in this video. I've genuinely found this idea of the in-tray so helpful, and I've been using it constantly for the last few years. It has such a big effect on your mind, because once you've written it down somewhere, it almost feels like your mind relaxes a bit. It's had a big impact not only on remembering things and meeting deadlines and getting back to people, but it has really lessened that constant feeling that you're forgetting something. My second tip for this video is to make use of lists. The GTD method by David Allen kind of just comes down to keeping an organized series of lists. There's your project list, there's your maybe/someday list, and then there's your next actions list. Probably the list I come back to most often is my projects list, which is just a page in my Notion. Having this list exist somewhere that you can easily check regularly, make sure that you don't forget about a project. I can't count the number of times that I've started a project with really excited about its potential, and then it gets hard and I procrastinate and lose steam, and then eventually the project just gets abandoned. But having a projects list like this will actually force me to continue to work on the project. Or if I take the project off the projects list, I'm making an active decision to abandon it, which is also okay. The projects list is just one example of the value of lists, but you can use lists for anything, from daily to-do lists, to checklists for things you do regularly, to a packing list for trips. If you want to read a book specifically about the power of the checklist, check out the Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande. It sounds really nerdy, but it's genuinely quite an interesting book with some really well-written stories and some powerful ideas. Tip number 3 is time blocking. This is a technique that I've tried on and off over the last few years, and whenever I can do it properly, I find that I'm much more productive and focused with my time. The basic idea is that you schedule every part of your day into blocks organized by specific tasks. So rather than one long block of work, you would break it down into different blocks and get more specific. You would allocate specific tasks or a category of tasks to each block of time, and then try as much as you can to stick to it. I do this using my Apple Calendar app, and I have different calendars that are different colors for different types of work, like videography or theater or writing. The value of time blocking is that by deciding in advance what your day or your week is going to look like, you take off the pressure of having to decide in the moment what to work on. Things are always changing throughout the day and stuff keeps coming up, so I think you're supposed to be flexible and adjust as you go. But using your calendar to block out your time is another way of getting things out of your head and getting organized. Time blocking also helps to make you conscious of how exactly you're using your time. If you're anything like me, you probably spend way too much time doing unimportant stuff that feels busy, like emails or reading stuff on Wikipedia, but not nearly enough time on the hard work that should be your main focus, which for me might be writing or planning or editing short films. Time blocking will make this really obvious to you if you edit your calendar as you go throughout the day to reflect what you actually worked on. Tip number 4 is the weekly review. The weekly review is another idea from David Allen's Getting Things Done book, and it's honestly one of the most useful things that I picked up. There are probably a million versions of the weekly review out there, but the basic idea is that you take a step back and look at all of your projects and tasks with a bird's eye view. You go through what you got done in the last week and what you need to carry forward into the next week. For my weekly review, I bring forward the leftover tasks from last week using my planner. I go through my Notion in tray and sort out the random thoughts or tasks into their relevant lists. I go through my projects list and try to make sure I have at least one task that will progress that project. And I go through my calendar and roughly do a time block for the coming week. The weekly review helps you stick to deadlines, it keeps you aware of the projects that you've got on your plate, and it helps to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. I remember a couple of years ago, before I started trying to get organized, I had scheduled a meeting with someone, but I wasn't using my calendar properly at the stage and I wasn't doing weekly reviews. The day of the meeting came round and the person sent me a message that said, "Hey, I'm here, I've got us a table by the window." And I was just at home chilling out. I'd completely forgotten about the meeting. Like, it wasn't actually a big deal in the end that I'd forgotten, but I felt horrible and useless. And just forgetting a meeting like that was kind of not good enough, so I knew that something needed to change. But now I use my calendar for time blocking and I have an in tray and I do weekly reviews, so something like this is probably not going to happen. So there you go, 4 tips that can help you with getting organized. A good reminder for myself and hopefully something useful for you. This stuff can get really intimidating with how in-depth it can become, like the whole second brain idea, but it doesn't have to be that complicated for it to be useful. You can start simple. Just start with some small habits and then build out from there. I would definitely recommend you at least start with having an in tray and doing a weekly review. This has the biggest impact in clearing your head and getting things down in a more concrete and structured way. If you have any questions or thoughts or suggestions about any of this, chuck it in the comments below. In the next video in this series, I'm going to share my thoughts on setting goals, which can be quite helpful or quite daunting depending on how you go about it. See you there.